exciting. Got it. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the art of visual schedules. I have the link to the presentation on my next slide, or you can go ahead and use that QR code to grab the link to the presentation. Again, my name is Darla Ashton. I am a BCBA based in Indiana. I work for a school district in central Indiana. I kind of wear multiple hats under my role. I work as a BCBA and kind of work on what we call the behavior team. So any teacher in our district that is kind of struggling with some student behavior or just need to kind of tighten some things up around a student's schedule, they can put in a request and somebody from my team will go out and assist with that. We do some coaching, we do some consulting, but I also double as the assistive technology coordinator for my school district. So this presentation was sort of birthed out of a lot of behavior assignments I had last year, just seeing the need for lots and lots of visual schedules. So I was telling Mike earlier, the best way to really get good at something is to have to teach it. So I just created this presentation sort of out of necessity of my team at that time having to get really better with visual schedules and supports. And it looks like, we've got a fairly small group here. So if anybody has any questions or wants to jump in and add anything, just turn your mics on and jump on in. I don't mind a lot of active participation here. So here's the link to the presentation if you want to grab that for later, and I'll post that again when we get to the end, or if somebody wants to go ahead and copy that into the chat box, that would be awesome. Just about some of my background, I got my bachelor's degree in speech language pathology, and then I got my master's in autism and ABA, and then went to sit for that big ol' nasty exam to become a BCBA, and so currently I do a little bit of training on that side of things and some supervision with students that are trying to become a BCBA. Okay, so today we are first going to look at what visual schedules are, and then we are going to look at a bunch of examples of visual schedules. So this is just a little taste of a visual schedule, a simple way that you can set it up to let your students know what's going to happen first and what's going to happen then. And this is a very simple way. Like, I like to start off with these kind of visuals, visual supports with students that maybe get really overwhelmed when you start to give them big, long lists of things that are going to happen during the day. And they need things really concise, and they just need a really quick, like, what's going to happen now and what's going to happen then. And we can refresh these pictures later and do another first and another then when we come to the next section of our bigger schedule. And then this was created using LessonPix, which we're going to talk about a lot later. That was the tool that was used to create this visual support. And Beth's on here. So Beth, make sure you jump into when we get to the LessonPix information so that you can share all of your knowledge and goodies. Okay, what is a visual schedule? So a visual schedule is really it's really just a visual support, and we use tons of visual supports in the field of special education and just in the general education classroom as UDL supports. But a visual schedule specifically is going to really look at showing kids how they're going to move throughout their day. It can look lots of different ways. It can, I think people traditionally think of a visual schedule as being picture symbols that are all up and down in a line vertically, showing everybody what's exactly going to happen throughout the day. But a visual schedule can also just look like words. If you have a student that is reading and that can handle just reading a schedule with words, it could be presented that way visually. I'm going to show you guys an example later of a map that I used as a visual schedule with a student. It can look like objects that you use to help a student visually transfer and walk around their day. So there's lots of different ways that you can visually present the schedule, but the main concept is you are showing a student what is going to happen in which order. So why is using a visual schedule so important? Like I said, this presentation was kind of birthed out of necessity because I had been on 3 consecutive behavior request calls where I got into a classroom and the teachers had the best laid plans out. They they had great lesson plans and they had great activities to do with their students, but they couldn't get these kids to come to the table, or the student would start to transition to a different environment that they needed to get to into the building. And they were on their way, say, to something that was a highly preferred activity like PE. And the teacher would get so frustrated because she'd say, he loves PE, but I cannot get him to go. And, you know, at the end of the day, when you looked at all the supports they had in place, what was missing was a visual schedule. And we know from the research that a visual of any kind can just make information permanent for a student. So if I am auditorily presenting that information, it can go in one ear and out the other. And if I need to access that information later, it's nowhere permanent for me to go back and grab it again. But as soon as you put it on a visual, it's in a permanent place that I can go back and find and reference again. We know that, you know, verbal directions and reminders and cues are going to disappear immediately. And we know that a lot of our students, you know, especially if you're looking at students who are on the autism spectrum, that auditory information is so difficult for them to retain sometimes. And the more visual that we can make something, the better shot we have at those kids latching onto it, understanding it, remembering it, and being able to process it. So if you've got a plan in your mind of what's going to happen during the day, just write it down and make it visual so that everybody in the room knows what that plan is going to be. I've seen visual schedules really become important also with staff members that are supporting students in the classroom. I've walked into rooms before and looked at some of the paraprofessionals and said, so what's going to happen next? Like, what do I need to get ready for next? And they'll look at me and say, I don't know what the plan is today. I know she's got a plan, but I don't know what the plan is. So just making, I mean, it can even help all of the different therapists and providers that are coming into the classroom kind of get on the same page with what is our plan for today? What do we need to mentally be prepared for? What do I physically need to set up the environment for? Because we know that we have to stay 1 or 2 steps ahead of these kids to make them successful in our classrooms. So this is an example of a visual schedule over here. This is a horizontal schedule. The idea here would be that you would have the pictures on top. And once you were finished doing whatever this piece of the schedule is, you would remove it. Maybe it's Velcroed on, you remove it and you put it into the finished column to show that we're all done with that piece. And then we would move on to the next piece of our schedule. So I just wanted to take a second to talk about the brain research, just because I think sometimes, you know, when I'll go into a classroom and I'll be talking with the teacher and say like, what about first steps? Let's start with a visual schedule. Sometimes they'll say, yeah, I've tried that. You know, like he didn't need it, or we tried it and it didn't work. I usually find that really digging in and showing the research can really help shift, kind of change your lens at the reason why we do this. Temple Grandin, I think a lot of people in our field are pretty familiar with her, somebody famous who has autism. There was a brain study where they looked at Temple's brain and they took some pictures and they went to look at the different language, how language is impacting her brain compared to a control patient. So if you see all of the purple that's lighting up on this side, this is showing you all the places in her brain that are lighting up when she is seeing a visual. It's taking that visual representation and it's putting it into action through motor and control and into her frontal cortex where that language is being processed. So if you show her a visual, all those places in her brain are lighting up and reacting to it. Versus over here, if you look at the control, there's a smaller area, but they have a bigger blue area. And that blue area is really looking at the auditory information that's coming in. When you are speaking and connecting auditorily, you know, what's happening in the brain there versus Temple, where she's just got that smaller section that if you're just going to rely on that auditory information, you know, that is what she's able to repeat. That's what she's able to hang on to. So I just think that that's a really powerful image to show the importance of maybe they got it, you know, maybe they got it on a Monday and you only had to say it and you didn't need to give a visual representation of it, but on a Tuesday, it might just not fire the same way as it did on a Monday. And, you know, we also kind of make that analogy of If a student needs glasses, you give them a pair of glasses they put on, and just because they can see well doesn't mean you take those glasses off and you throw them away. You need to continue using those glasses to continue to see well. So even when a student gets into the flow of their schedule and you think that they've got it down pat and they know it, don't pull off those glasses. Don't take away that visual schedule. You keep it in place, and you keep it there as a permanent support. Okay, when and where are we going to use a visual schedule? We are going to use them everywhere. And this is something that, we also get caught in sometimes where I'll be working with the staff and we'll get something kind of going for pack up is usually like one of the biggest requests. Like teachers will be like, they can't pack up all their things at the end of the day and get out the door. And we're late getting out to the bus every day. And I want them to be able to do this. And here we are, it's, February, and he still can't get into the flow of getting all his things into his backpack and getting out the door. So we'll spend a lot of intentional time creating like a task analysis or a visual schedule of everything, all the steps that need to happen, which, by the way, if you really write down a task analysis of all the steps that need to happen to pack up and leave a building, it's crazy. You can get to 20 steps sometimes when you really break it all down. So that is a lot for some students to handle. But my point is, like, we'll put in a lot of effort and time into doing that schedule. And then later, when there are other problems happening throughout the day, we'll come back and say, okay, like, what are you struggling with? We'll look at that time of the day and they don't have a visual schedule for that time of the day, but we know it works because it worked for that chunk of the day. So we just need to add another schedule for different tasks and different environments, and, different things that student is going to encounter throughout the day. Also, looking at building stamina with a student. Maybe you're starting at that place where you're just starting with a first then visual, and that's all a kiddo can handle in the very beginning. But hopefully you're working on that stamina of, okay, now in a month, we're going to look at 3 things on a schedule that we have to get done, maybe before a reinforcement break comes into play. Or, maybe we're going to look at extending that schedule. And like yesterday, you were only able to stay in language arts for 15 minutes, but today we're going to expand our schedule so that we're going to try to stay in here for 20 minutes. Lots of different ways of looking at building that stamina for students. Okay, and who needs a visual schedule? Everybody needs a visual schedule. I make the argument that we as adults are using visual schedules all the time. Ours just look maybe a little bit different than what our students are using. So, I'm the type of person, I have an Outlook calendar. I am referring to that all the time. I have a standing Monday morning meeting. It starts every Monday morning at 7:30. I know that. It is permanent. I have been going to that meeting for years. And yet still every Sunday night, I opened up my calendar and I look to see what's going to happen on Monday morning. It's something that gives you comfort to know what's ahead of you, how long something's going to last, what are the expectations when I am in that task. And because we are using it all the time, we have to find ways to provide that to our students too. Now, we all use different tools. I have a set of tools that I like to use for my reminders and for my schedules, and those are not the same tools that another adult is going to use. So the same thing is going to happen with our students. Sometimes those schedules are going to look very different from each other, how we present them. But the same concept is there. We're telling them what is going to happen during their day and what to prepare for. So off to the side here, we have a picture of, this was a student. I wanted to show you guys something from a middle school student, because I feel like a lot of times when I've seen things on visual schedules, they're almost always aimed towards like younger students or a lot of picture symbol representations. This was a student in middle school. He was in a general education classroom. He did not want to look babyish. He didn't want, he did not need a picture symbol representation schedule. He could read, but he also needed a lot more information jammed into that schedule. So this was a kid who not only needed to know what was going to come first and next. You can see that up on this. He had a desk close to the whiteboard so that he could have all this information, and kind of needed some extra support surrounding him. So he had his first and next visual, but he also needed to know like what the expectations were within that visual schedule. How much work was he going to have to get done for the day? When he was finished getting his work done, what were his choices to do after? In this case, he was getting a break. He could do whatever he wanted to do, but there were going to be some days where, a break wasn't going to be feasible. So maybe written under when finished, it was going to say, open up your book from language arts and read part of your novel. And then what's next? Who am I going to next? Who am I going to see next? What next teacher is going to come in and do intervention with me? And you also see access to a visual clock over here off to the side. And sometimes that was used to kind of pace him through parts of his schedule also. First, we're going to do, math homework. How long do you need to do math homework for? We're going to set that timer for 15 minutes. And then even if you're not finished with all the math homework within 15 minutes, your timer's done. That's all we were going to ask of you. And you're able to go to that next piece of the schedule. Okay, when you're setting up that visual schedule, just a couple of things to think about. Really be intentional with what type of schedule you're going to provide. And, the next few slides, I'm going to go through and show you lots of different examples of what those can look like. But again, not every visual schedule is created equal for every student. And you're going to have students that are going to do better with real pictures. And you're going to have some students that are going to be, be able to understand it better if they're using real objects as opposed to pictures. Some kids are going to do a really nice job with that video modeling piece where they're actually seeing it in real time, somebody working through a task or doing whatever's part of their schedule next. Also thinking about the physical layout. And you've got options. You can present a schedule one piece at a time. You can make it a long horizontal line where everything throughout the day is going to just go boom, 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 boom. You've got a vertical schedule. You can present just first then. And depending on your kid, you're gonna want to make different choices depending on what their needs are. One of the biggest pieces that I see when I'm out working with teams that kind of falls apart with visual schedules, a teacher will spend a lot of time creating it and it's beautiful. But where we drop the ball is we don't teach the student how to independently use it. And the whole hope of having a visual schedule is that you don't have to give a lot of adult support. We want those students to really gain that independence of managing their time and managing their schedule on their own. So the hope is in time, they're independently managing that and they don't need you to hold their hand through any of it. But in order for that to happen, we have to be intentional with how we teach it. So when you're first introducing that schedule, showing a student how to pace through it. And when I'm finished with a piece of my schedule, what am I doing with it? So a lot of times I will use the Notes app on my phone as a visual schedule, sometimes of things I need to pace through, and I'll put little check boxes in my Notes app so that I can check things off as I'm done. That's how I'm kind of pacing through. Some of these students, like I said earlier, are going to want to have Velcroed schedules where they're pulling off the picture and putting it into an all done pouch, or maybe they're taking it over to the next place that they need to transition to within a classroom to kind of mark, okay, now I'm going to the green center and here's my green piece of the schedule to show where I need to go next. But teaching students how to pace through and mark when something is done and then looking to see what is next. And using that gradual release, method of, we're going to give you a lot of support in the beginning, and then we're going to try to tailor off as we go so that we get to the point where you're able to pace through that on your own. Hold on here. So let me go to the next. There we go. Okay, so these are some of the tools that we're going to walk through next. I want to take a look at the Choiceworks visual app, LessonPix, BoardMaker, and Google Keep. And these are just a couple of the digital tools that I use to help create visual schedules. There's lots of different ways of getting it done, but we'll kind of walk through some of those as different examples. The Choiceworks app is available on an iPad. It runs for about $17. And I really like using the Choiceworks app when I have a student that I know I'm going to have to make lots of changes in their schedule throughout the day, potentially at a minute's notice. Because if you're using a paper-based visual schedule, let's say something pops up during the day that you have to make a quick change for. One way you can do that with a paper schedule is to create like an extra box and always keep like an oops. That's what I mean. I usually keep what I call an oops card on, so I can stick the oops picture onto the schedule to kind of show like, uh-oh, something has changed in our schedule that we weren't expecting. And this oops is showing us that things are going to get a little different, or, something unexpected is coming right now. But if I know that I'm going to have to make a lot of those changes on a daily basis with a student and change our plan often, I like to use the Choiceworks app because I can digitally manipulate that schedule really quickly and have it ready to go. So within this app, it comes with a picture symbol library. You can put in your own pictures. You can import your own pictures. You can import your own video, but you can also use the picture supports that the picture symbols they already have built into their library. You can add as many pieces to this schedule as you like. The pictures start to get smaller and smaller the more pieces of the vertical schedule that you add in, but you can add in as many steps as you want. And then a really nice feature that they have is this timer built in. So if you don't have to use the timer, but if you want to put timers next to each piece of your schedule, you can. And that's just really nice for our students that, again, we're looking to build stamina within their schedule. If today is a day that, he is not going to be able to handle doing a lot of academic work, we're just not in our upstairs brain to get a lot done, then maybe that's a day where I'm only going to time it out to 5 minutes that we have to sit and do our math boxes. And if we're not finished in 5 minutes, that's okay. Our 5-minute timer went off. We're moving to the next piece of our schedule. But tomorrow I want to up that to 7 minutes. So it's really easy for me to get in and digitally make that swap in the moment. Another really nice feature of Choiceworks, at the bottom of their schedules, they allow you to put in some reinforcement. So if you have a kid, we do a lot of work systems with students where they have like a 3-drawer system where they have to do 1, 2, and 3, and then they're all done. Well, when they're all done, they've earned some sort of reinforcement break. This is a nice way to kind of visually show when you're all finished with something here, what your choices are. Sometimes we're using this as a teaching tool also, because I think sometimes we get stuck in this, okay, you did some work, here's your reward. Well, in the real world, when I get a little bit of work done, I have to go and do more work. I don't really get a break. I don't get a reward. So sometimes at the end of these schedules, we're not necessarily putting something fun down here, but we are giving a choice of 2 tasks. So you finished everything you needed to do in math. Now I can either choose to read my book for language arts, or I can listen to an audiobook on the computer. So we're not necessarily getting, fun time reinforcement, but we are making a choice as to what work we are moving on to next. Choiceworks is also really nice because it has an added audio feature. So when I click on these boxes, it would say, if on the iPad I touched math boxes, it would say math boxes. It's going to read out loud to the student each piece of that schedule. And when you're finished with it, you just slide it over into the all done column. And then there's a reset button. So tomorrow when I open it up, I just hit reset and we're ready to go again. Does anybody have any questions about Choiceworks while we're on it? Because we're going to move on to a different tool. But if you have specific questions, I could try to answer those right now. Just turn on your mic if you got something.
Hey, Darla.
Yeah.
Are you using this as a classroom device, or are you using that with individual students within the class?
We've done it both ways.
Okay.
I have different teachers have liked to set it up in different ways. For example, I have an early childhood preschool teacher right now who is using it with 6 different kids in her classroom, and they each have their own iPad with their own Choiceworks schedules on it. And this is also kind of a nice feature of the app. They allow you to set different kinds of music behind those timers. So like when your timer goes off, every kid has a different song that plays to kind of let them know that that's their schedule, that's beeping and telling them to come and check it. But I have a teacher who does like a developmental primary classroom of kindergarten and first graders, and she likes to use it just like as her teaching schedule for everybody. So when she's doing small groups or when she's sitting at calendar, she will open it up and walk through it with everybody. It can be used as a full classroom schedule. I think the magic in it, again, though, is trying to teach kids how to pace through it on their own and self-manage it. So I think ideally you would have an iPad with this app for every student. We have had some classrooms where there's only been one iPad available, but within the app, they have built multiple schedules. So multiple kids are going and opening up the app and going to their individual schedule to manage it. So you can make it work lots of different ways. Anybody else? Okay. So this wasn't using any fancy tools. This is an example of a kiddo that we had in kindergarten who came to us from an ABA center. Very little verbal language, just cute as a button, but boy, he did not know how he didn't know how to be in school. It was really overwhelming for him to be in a classroom full of kids. Just anything he could get his hands on, he was going to throw it immediately, rip it, destroy it, smiling and laughing the whole time he was doing it. So he was having a great time, but we just really noticed immediately we needed to shrink his world to kind of teach a few things before we brought him up into the wild of a full kindergarten classroom. So with this little kiddo, we took him into a smaller room to kind of start building some skills. And his teacher, who is amazing, he loves trains. So she said, we're going to create this train schedule for him, and we're going to put it all around the room. And she just did it. She just created it using Google. I'm going to pop over and show you guys kind of what that looked like. So this is the train that moves throughout the schedule. And then each one of these slides, she printed out, and these are all different pieces of his schedule. She printed out and posted all around the room. So it was like one big long train track. And he would move his bus through the train tracks to each piece of his schedule throughout the day. And you'll notice on here, we're kind of breaking up a lot of his work time so that he's just having to do a little piece of work at a time before we move on to something that's a little more gross motor involved. He's a very active kid, lots of energy. And then in time, we use this to transfer into the classroom. So the teacher was really creative with this, where we had this small room he was working in attached to the classroom, and the train just slowly started to go into the classroom to get back into the main room to do some more pieces of his puzzle. And within about 3 months' time, we had him in that gen ed classroom for the full day. So that was just a really exciting kind of out of the box way to set up a picture schedule that was very specific to his needs and very specific to his preferences, and was kind of super fun to watch him get acclimated in the classroom with that. Okay, this was one of my favorites. This kiddo was a student that was really having a hard time. He had a really long history of trauma. He had come to us from California. His house had been burned down in the California wildfires. Then his school decided they weren't sure what placement was best for him. He's a kid on the spectrum. He, at the time, I think was 1st or 2nd grade, was really struggling in the gen ed environment. So while they thought about what placement they were going to put him in or what special program they were going to look at, they just asked him to not come to school. So he had been out of school for like 3 months from that exposure, and then COVID hit. And so then he was out in California, and he was out of school for almost like 2 years. And then he comes to us. So he hasn't been in school for a long time, very overwhelmed. Again, like lots big moves. I'm in Indiana, so that was not a small move for him. And he was just showing a lot of elopement behavior, and just like really struggling to get him to sit down and do anything academically. And so he was really aversive to a traditional visual schedule because his speech language pathologist was using a visual schedule to get him through therapy time. And in his head, that visual schedule setup was only for speech time. And so the first day that I came in to work with him and I tried to replicate that, thinking, well, it's already working with the speech path. I'm going to go with it. He destroyed the room we were working in and was screaming at me the whole time. This isn't speech time. It's just very black and white to him that visual was for that time only, and I was going to have to come up with something new. So my thing became the treasure map, and I started using LessonPix. So shout out to Beth if she's still on here. LessonPix, super cheap online tool where you can easily create a million different kinds of visual supports. But one of the things that they already have built in is a treasure map. And so all you need to do is pick the pictures that you want to go into that treasure map, you dump them into what they call the tray, and you create, and it makes this beautiful visual for you of where we're going to start and where we're going to end. And so this was the system I started using with him. Super successful. I got really worried a couple weeks in because we had a field trip to the zoo. And this was a kid historically, again, just like a lot of elopement behavior, anything that he was not expecting to happen or that did not go his way could really result in some big explosive behavior. And I was the lucky winner that was going to get to go with him and be his one-on-one during that experience. So I really wanted to prepare and get ready. So we wrote a lot of social narratives leading up to it. I used LessonPix to create those as well. And we created this treasure map so that he could really see ahead of time exactly the path we were going to go. I was really worried that there were a couple of animals that he was going to find boring and some that he was going to want to get to immediately. And we kind of had to take a certain path to get there. So we just did a lot of priming with this as our visual schedule of here's the order everything's going to go in, and here's when you're going to finally get to lunch. And so, we had a lot of extra supports added in place, but this treasure map was really huge and kind of making things concrete for him as to what that field trip was going to look like. And it went great. He had a wonderful time. So I was very thankful to have this support to get me through that day. And I think, okay, so here's a lot of other examples of the templates that are already built into LessonPix. So, this is something that I did with an early childhood class recently. They didn't have any visual schedules in place, but they had 2 kids that really needed one. And so we kind of made it a game where each kid got to pick which template that they liked the best to kind of personalize to their needs. And so you've got rockets and you've got the owls and the turtle, and they're all kind of visually set up a little bit different, but just such an easy way to just plug in whatever's going to be on your daily schedule, and then let those kids kind of have some creativity and control over, and it makes them feel special that they got to pick their own schedule. So we've got this classroom that has 6 or 7 different visual schedules, but they're all accomplishing the same goal. Beth, do you want to chime in? Is there anything I missed that I should be hitting that you want to say, or if she's still on here?
I'm still here and you're doing an amazing job. I love this. This is great. These are just like some of the kind of non-traditional ways non-traditional templates for visual schedules. And yeah, you're right on the money. Thanks,
okay.
Darla.
Well, thanks, Beth. And, just to also LessonPix just added the ability to add on to use it as an add-on in your Google Slides. And so I sent out an email kind of demonstrating some stuff with that last week in my district, and that blew up. I got so much great feedback on how wonderful that is, especially for our teachers that are looking to create a lot of social narratives on Google Slides, how easy it is now to pull in an image and use those visual references for their social narratives. So just a great and just so cheap, worth every penny. This is an example of another early childhood classroom that really wanted to look at. They had one student that they really felt like needed a visual schedule. And when I went in and kind of looked at the structure of the classroom, this was a student who he does not like to be different from his peers. He gets very upset if he is treated differently or given extra accommodations that other people are not given. He will complain that kind of go into a rage of, I am not a baby, do not treat me differently. So we had a conversation as a team about, okay, Billy really needs the visual schedule. Your 7 other kids don't, but Billy really doesn't like to be told by adults what to do. What if we just created it for the whole classroom? And then you've got these great built-in peer model moments where we don't have to tell Billy anything. We can teach some of these other kids how to do it. And once they start doing it, Billy's probably going to fall in line too. And I could tell that maybe the teacher wasn't completely sold on this, but I will tell you, I went back this week. They were all set up on the wall over here, Velcroed to the wall, Velcroed with a picture. Each kid got to pick their favorite character out for their schedule. And she said, oh, Billy hasn't been looking at it at all yet. And I said, that's okay. It might take time, but how are your other kids doing with it? And she was like, well, they get it and they're doing great at it, but they don't need it. I think they all need it. I think I need it. Everybody needs it. I think her staff members need it. But she's not convinced yet, but I think she's going to be, because that day, during the second transition of the day, Billy walked over before anybody else did and took off his schedule and dumped it in and went to the next location in the room that he was supposed to go to. And everybody's mouth kind of dropped and looked at me and they were like, he's never done that before. He never comes to circle time. So a good lesson in like, sometimes it just takes some time. You have to persevere. You have to keep up that flow. Use the other kids in your room to be the model. Use the other kids in the room to be the teacher. So it doesn't always feel like it's an adult, ripping into some kid's ear, telling him what to do all the time. He clearly, his MO is he wants to be like everybody else. So let's bring it to the masses. It certainly is not hurting those other kids to use their own schedules. And if the consequences, it makes it better for Billy, then everybody's a winner there. These are just a few other examples of things I've seen around my district. We have some teachers that are not like super into high tech, artsy, they're not your Pinterest teachers, if you will. And that's okay. These are still getting the job done, just different ways of presenting a schedule to a student. This teacher over here, she liked to carry around this file folder, and she used to keep a bunch of different pictures Velcroed inside of here, kind of like a library, so that any moment in the gen ed classroom, if she was the special ed teacher, if she wasn't quite sure what the gen ed teacher had planned for the day, she had her little library here where she could quickly come up with that schedule in the moment in the classroom to help support that student that she was there to do some intervention work with. This teacher right here is just using a checkoff list. This teacher right here, just nitty gritty Velcro strip, put those pictures on, pull them off, and put them into an all done card when you're finished. And Google Keep, I like to give this a plug because Google Keep is free. It is super easy and intuitive to use. And I think, again, a lot of times we get really into the visual schedules with our little ones. And then by the time some of our kids get into middle school, we're like, well, we're not going to use picture symbols with them anymore. So there's nothing left to do. And Google Keep is just a great, easy tool, a digital tool that those kids can be using to create their own schedules and to kind of pace through things. And you'll see here some different examples of ways we've used it with students. We just even have some students that, for the first time are going out and spending longer chunks of time in the gen ed classroom. And so when your special education teacher or your paraprofessional can't be with you all day long, to help you kind of remember some things that, kind of help you keep it together throughout the day, we've created these notes that talk about what are your strategies that you're going to use. And then we ask them, check off whatever you're using in the classroom, because if we see a pattern of you not using deep breathing, then that means we need to be practicing it more and drilling it more when you are in the special ed environment with us, and we have that time to do a little more one-on-one intervention. So just nice, good visual scheduled reminders of things, ways to kind of show what you have to do in a classroom, just different ways of visually presenting that information. And then last, I like to end on object schedules, because this is also pretty outside of the box, but we've seen a lot of success with this with our little ones in the early childhood classroom. For your kids that just need something a little more tactile, we've had some students that have some low vision issues where, using a picture symbol, even if you go high resolution, low resolution is not going to be a good fit for them. We're going to give them something real tactile and really an object to use to transition around the room. So we had a student in the early childhood room a couple of years ago that he could not transition even within the room. Anytime it was time to go to the play center versus the table versus the snack table, just would break out hysterically crying every time it was time to get up and move, and would have to have somebody kind of help him physically move across the room to get there. We put an object schedule in place where he had a little token, and every time it was time to move, he took that token and had to go over to the place that he was transitioning to and drop the token into the cup. And we paired that with a song. We called it our movement song, so that he knew it was time to get up and move and go to the next location. And within 2 weeks, that kid was transitioning around the classroom independently without any adult attention. And the crying, we put that crying on extinction. So just kind of a different way of setting it up that really worked for him. So even though that object didn't necessarily have a visual representation of where he was going to next, he knew it meant it was time to get up and move. And then they, slowly started putting kind of pictures on those tokens to show him, here's the location in the classroom you're moving to right now. I think they did it, if I remember correctly. They hung some ceiling decorations down of different colors around the room. So if he had a red token or a picture of a token with a red picture on it, it meant he had to go to the red hanging object location in the classroom. Okay. So, you know, the biggest thing about a visual schedule is just to start. I've seen some teachers get stuck sometimes before in, well, you know, I keep meaning to do that. I just haven't had the time to sit down and really make a good one yet. Just start. Anything that you have sitting around to grab and use and to get going, the better. And, you know, there's no wrong way to do it. I always say, like, just getting going in itself, you are winning the battle, and you are putting something into practice. The worst thing you can do is sit around and talk about it and not start to try anything. But I promise you, if you've got a kid that's really having difficulty in his day, this is the first place to start, getting those visuals into place and helping kind of create a concrete schedule. It's your first stop on your way to success. So that is all I have for today.
Real fast.
Yeah.
So you might have saw I am a high schooler with autism, but I've always, when they've used the symbols with me when I was younger, I always got very excited about it. So now, like, for the past 4 years, I've been making visual supports on BoardMaker. I'm like a pro at BoardMaker. I have all the BoardMaker people talking to me all the time.
Okay.
And I do a lot of other stuff with assistive technology. If anybody ever needs something made, I can throw it together.
That is an awesome, that is a great favor to throw out there.
That made me laugh, Jessica. What a great offer you just threw out there. Jessica, put your contact information in the chat for people so they know where you are.
Okay, I'll do my Instagram, and then I'll put my email.
It's a deal. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
That's awesome.
I love it.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Nice.
Well, thank you guys for coming. Thanks for listening to my spiel. And yeah, I love that, Jessica. If anybody else has a tip or a story, I love to share success stories. I think, you know, that really helps kind of spread the hype sometimes. So I'd love to hear it. If you want to shoot me an email or find me on Twitter, if anybody's on Twitter, I'm a Twitter junkie. I like to collect friends there. I like to read.
Be Darla's friend. That's what her final word she wants to leave with you. Be her friend on Twitter.
For sure.
Everybody, thank you for joining us today. Darla, outstanding, amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, everybody, it's been a pleasure. I will post this up online on our project website if people are looking for it. The video will be NHATconnect.com will be the website. All right, everybody. Thanks again, Darla. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Mike.